It's 7 o'clock, so we'll make a start. So this is a little bit of a different session. I know we came in last time and did a little bit in the lab because it was starting to get a bit cool. Since July, we've had a pretty good summer. We've had a lot of warm weather, and September's been fantastic as well. So we're a little bit ahead with harvesting compared to last year, and we're in the thick of it. Having said that, we actually had a quiet day today because we finished picking one variety, and we'll be starting to pick another one on Monday. So we've actually got a slightly quieter weekend. So I haven't got quite as many grapes flying in and out behind me as we would normally have. In fact, all the staff have gone home. They've had an early Saturday night for a change. And it's just me and Elaine left here. You remember Elaine's the one that makes it all work behind the scenes, and hopefully, well, we hope it'll all work behind the scenes. So just a few things, a little bit of housekeeping that help to make things go better. Make sure that you're always on mute. I don't think you can unmute yourselves, but we have had that happen a little bit in the past. So there's a mute button in the corner of your screen. So that should be on all of the time. And you can choose whether you want to have the video on or off. Sometimes if you're struggling with internet speed, then off is better. Just remember that if it's on, then we can see you as much as you can see us. So yeah, just be aware of that. What else have we got? Yes, we're going to do a few polls and during the session. So we're going to taste some wines, and we're going to ask you to mark those again as we did last time. And this time we're actually also going to have we're going to try a chat feature, which is where you can type in a question. And if Elaine doesn't think that I'm covering it already, then she can let me know, and I'll try and answer that for you. We're going to show a few video clips as well, so you have to bear with us on that, because bear in mind that we're not that experienced at IT, so we might have the odd blip along the way, but hopefully it'll go reasonably smoothly. So we ought to start off with a wine. If I'm doing this in order, the danger is that we won't taste any wine for half an hour, so I think it would be rude not to. I've got to actually start off with, just to get you working, we're going to do a poll. We've got a couple of polls we'd like to do to start with. This is more for my information, our information as much as anything, just to get an idea of whether you've had a taste, you've been on the virtual tasting before, or whether this is a first time for you. And then we're also quite interested to know how far away people are and whether you visited 3 quite. So 3 very quick polls coming up whilst I get the first wine ready. There you go. There's the first one. So have you been to one of our tastings before? And all you do is select which one, and then Elaine will press the end poll button, and then we'll have an answer. We've been quite surprised by some of the poll results that we've done in the past. There's quite a lot of people who are joining us who haven't been to see us yet, and quite a few people who haven't been to see us for a long time, and also an awful lot of people who are a long way away from us. So it's quite interesting to see what's where you're all coming from. So I've got pretty even between some of you that have done all 3 and some of you that have not done any before. So that's actually quite consistent with last time, I think. So the next question. Oh. There you go. Elaine's given you the answers. So you can see that most of you have not been here yet, and I hope you'll put that right in the future when things settle down again. Oh, this is the tasting one. Have you? Sorry.
This is just the how many tastings you've been to.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I'm getting confused already. I haven't had a drink yet. So try it. Yeah. Okay. So next one coming up. Any minute now. There you go. So have you, we've asked you about whether you've done the virtual tasting before. So a couple of questions here in this poll. Have you visited 3 Choirs before? And how far away are you?
You should have had a glass of wine before you did.
Yeah, I'm going to get a glass of wine ready now. So the results are. So once again, it's quite interesting. So quite a few of you are quite a long way away from us, and quite a few of you have, well, some of you haven't been to see us yet, but a lot of you have, some of you quite a long time ago. So all interesting stuff for us, so thank you very much for that. You deserve a drink. So, since some of you did this test before, this tasting before, you might remember that actually I was talking about sparkling wine and the importance of glasses. So I thought we would have a look at, I'll try and do the experiment a little bit better this time. So I've got a glass here that I have washed in detergent and cleaned and wiped with a tea towel. So that's dry and all ready to have my sparkling wine put in. Got another glass here, which I just rinsed in hot water and just left to drain. So I haven't used any detergents on it, and I will see if there's any difference in the bubbles. As this is a live experiment, it's bound to disappoint, but we'll have a go. And you can do the same. So this is the one which has had detergent in, and this is the one that hasn't.
Recently.
That has failed completely. Unless I got my glasses muddled up.
I think you might have done, because
Oh, yeah,
that was quite active.
I have. I've put my glasses along there. So there you are. So here's the same bottle. If I hold them up, two wines poured at the same time. One where the glass is working well, and the other one where the glass isn't doing the wine any favors. So there you go. Apparently, if you get it right, the bubbles, a glass of sparkling wine will give you 1 million bottles a minute. Bubbles. What did I say?
Bottles.
There we go. Time for a drink. So cheers. Raise our glasses, and one person in particular to raise a glass to, I think she's joined us, is Carol Bailey, who emailed me a long time ago and said, could we have a tasting on the 19th of September because it's her birthday. So if you are there, Carol, happy birthday. So this is the classic cuvee. It's a non-vintage wine. This will be mostly 2017 with a little bit of 2016. 2017 was a really good year for sparkling wine because the acid stayed quite high, and you need a little bit more acidity in a sparkling wine. We'll talk about how we achieve that in a little while when we talk about the pressing stage. But we didn't make much in 18 because 18 was a very ripe full year. But this year we've got very ripe grapes as well, so this will be very similar to 18. But in 2019, the grapes were quite good for sparkling, so we've made quite a bit then as well. So when we're looking at a sparkling wine, we're sort of judging it by looking at the bubbles is one of the things, and the smaller the bubbles, the better the quality of the wine. So lots and lots of small pinheads is a very, very good thing to see. And This is a brut style, so it's got about 7 or 8 grams of residual sugar, so it's dry, but it's got a little bit of fruitiness to it as well. And really, our style of sparkling is a little bit different on this side of the country. On our sandy soils, we get a little bit more fruit character, a little bit more fruit driven. All of our wines are compared to the southeast. So there's a lot of talk about English wine at the moment, and English wine is talked about as being one wine. And I think over the next few years, we'll get a little bit more provenance, a little bit more regional differentiation, and you'll be able to sort of get used to wines from different areas of the country. So anyway, cheers, and happy birthday, Carol. Our first mistake of the night, I haven't given Elaine anything. Put that right now. There we are. Phew, that was close. Right. So the whole idea tonight is to just look a little bit about how we cope with the grapes and how we make decisions to do with the wines that we're making. So all of the wines tonight are blends, and that's really done on purpose because at least we can talk about lots of different varieties then. So the the classic cuvee has got a variety called Seyval Blanc in it, which grows really well in the UK. Has quite nice acidity. We're also adding a little bit of Pinot Noir and a little bit of Reichensteiner and Phoenix from time to time as well. 2 varieties that are starting to work really well in sparkling as well. So I don't know whether you've got food with you tonight. I decided that I'd be brave enough and go and ask the restaurant if I could have a little bit of cheese. And they very kindly gave me this. So I'm all right tonight. So I'll be trying a few of the cheeses as well as we go through some of the wines. That's if I stop talking at all. So what was quite good is that they actually put on some grapes. So these are eating grapes. And those are our grapes. These are our Madeleine grapes, which we've just picked today. So you can see the difference in size. Very, very small grapes, wine grapes, but there's a lot more sugar in these. These have got an awful lot of juice in them, a lot of flesh, and they tend to be lower in sugar, but much, much lower in acid as well. So they still taste quite sweet to eat. Whereas these have got more sugar and more acidity, much, much smaller. And what we do when the grapes start to ripen is we bring them up to the winery, into the lab. We put them into a bag. This isn't the whole crop. This is just when we're testing to see if we're actually ready for pressing. And so I'll just squeeze them in the bag and actually get all of the juice out. Yes, it sort of flies around at the moment. And then I pour it, squeeze the juice out. And there I have my juice that's come out of the grapes. I then need another flask, and I also need this little machine here, which is a refractometer, and this will tell me how much sugar is in the grapes. So all I do is I just pour a little bit of the juice onto this machine, and then it will give me a reading. I can't tip it because all of the juice will fall off. So this actually says 79, and that's a reading which is there are lots of different ways of testing sugar, but that basically gives us an idea of how much sugar is in the grape and therefore how much alcohol it will make once we ferment it. So 79 is a pretty good reading. We've had grapes anywhere between mid-70s and mid-80s this year, so really, really good sugar levels, which will be very good for us. So that would suggest that those grapes are ready for picking, but we also need to look at the acidity as well. So we're going to test the acid, which we do by taking some of the juice. We take the juice into another flask. There can be a little bit, there's quite a lot of pulp that gets through doing this method, so I'm not doing very well. I'm going to cheat because I've got one that I've settled a little bit earlier, just off screen. So there we are, I've got 25 mils of juice, and I put it in my flask. And then we do what's called a titration, which is just basically it's an alkaline solution with an indicator in it, and I just add that to the wine, so to the juice, until it changes colour, which is just done there. And then I'll take a reading off, which tells me that it's got 9 grams of acidity in it. So that's the method that we use in order to test our grapes. And we use that method all the way through in testing grapes and in juice later on. So when I refer to sort of sugars and acids, that's the test that we're constantly doing. And we're making our decisions on when to pick grapes. And there isn't a right answer necessarily. There's a range that's good, and a range that's good for sparkling wine would tend to be slightly lower sugars and slightly higher acids, so you pick it slightly earlier. And with varieties like Grape, we're hanging on for as long as we can to get as much sweetness and complexity in the grape as we possibly can. So, where do I go now? Sorry, I've written a few notes this time to make sure I don't miss anything out. The last few times I've finished the session and thought, oh, I didn't say this and I didn't say that. So, you've probably had long enough to try the sparkling wine now. So what we'd like to do tonight, as we did last time, is actually ask you to mark it out of 10, just get an idea. And at the end of it, we can then tell which wine we think's performed the best. It's really good for us. Wines, they alter with age. We could run the same poll 2 or 3 times over 3 or 4 different weeks with different bottles and probably get different answers. So it's just very good to get an idea of what's tasting well and what's popular. So we'd be very grateful if you mark them. You can bear in mind that you've got another 5 to come. So if you do give it 10, then you haven't got anywhere to go with the next one.
You can mark it 10.
You could mark it 10, absolutely. I'd be delighted. But so if you remember, we also spoke in the last tasting we did about how we actually mark the wine. We sort of look at it. We're looking at the colour. We're looking at the bubbles with sparkling wine, and then we're looking at the taste and sort of combining 3 marks to come up with a mark. That's how they do it professionally. But for us, I think just 1 mark out of 10 is fine. How are we looking? Reasonably okay. We're above 5 all of the time, which is nice.
Yeah.
Yep. That's good. Thank you for that. So, it might be an idea if you're either pour yourself small amounts or drink quickly or have 2 glasses on you. So we're going to taste, we'll pour the second wine now and we'll talk about it a little later on, because what we're going to do now is we're going to actually discuss a little bit about the harvest, about how we do the harvest, and I'll show you a little video of some picking that's been going on in the last few days. So the second wine we're going to try is Coleridge Hill. We just had a debate over whether we should try Coleridge Hill or Willow Brook first. And I remember now why I wanted to do Willow Brook first, but I'll tell you about that.
Change it.
So Coleridge Hill is a blend. This is a 2019 wine, so this is from the last vintage, a year younger than the Willow Brook that we'll try afterwards. But so 2019 was quite a difficult harvest. The summer was quite good, and then in September, late August, September, it started to rain, and I don't think it really stopped raining until February. So the harvest was quite tricky to find good days to pick the grapes. The sugar levels were slightly down, but the yields were reasonable. But they've made slightly lighter wine, so that's well suited to young drinking. So we're allowed to add a little bit of a previous vintage, so you can add up to 15% of a previous vintage, and it can still be called that vintage. So this has got 15% of a 2018 wine in as well, just to help with a bit of consistency and a little bit of complexity. So a little bit of floral notes from it. That will be coming from the Madeleine, and a little bit of crispness on the finish will be coming from the Phoenix. And I've forgotten to pour a glass again.
No, don't worry.
Okay. Right. Okay. So I'm now going to try and be clever and share my screen and show you a little video of some picking going on. So bear with me while I try and sort this. There we go. So this is our vineyard. If you haven't visited, then this is what we look like. So those rooms there, the building is to the left is the winery, and to the right is the sort of accommodation and restaurant. We started picking this year on the 1st of September, and these are Grape grapes, which have got a very, very short ripening period, so they ripen very early. So our harvest timing is about the same as it was in 2018. Those Grape grapes are quite pink, so when they fully ripen, they do have a very, very pink skin. So those grapes I showed you earlier were Madeleine, which stay very green right the way through to ripeness, but these get really good colour on them. We've actually left an acre of these to ripen more, and we'll be making a late harvest from that, which we can talk about a little bit later on when we're talking about the winemaking. So we've got 75 acres here, and we'd be expecting to pick about 150, 160 tonnes this year, which will give us about 150,000 bottles of wine. We do all of the picking by hand, and because of the situation this year, we've got a smaller gang, so they're picking longer hours, but they are our best pickers. So the idea is to try and pick the grape and not too much stalk and not to get too much leaf in it. And the other thing we try and do is as soon as they're picked, we try and get them up to the winery. So they're picked into these bins, and then they'll come back to the winery, and we'll try and get them into the press quite quickly. We'll catch up with the pressing in a little bit. So there you are. That's our. I hope that your internet was good enough to see that. Okay. I think that it sort of showed quite well what the picking season's like. We've been really, really lucky this year. The weather has been fantastic so far. I've heard that the forecast is not quite so good for the second part of this week, so we'll have to hope. But we've certainly got a very good start, and we're actually, in acreage terms, we're probably getting on for nearly halfway through. So it's been a really good summer for us. So when we're deciding whether to pick or not, there's all sorts of things we look at. We've done the analysis. We've also got to look at the condition of the grape as well, because sometimes we're waiting, and as a grape ripens, and quite evident in this bunch actually. This is right at the end of our picking of Madeleine, but you can see there's a few grapes that have disappeared already. That's probably birds that have taken them. The wasps have been very interested in them this year as well. And then you can see a little bit of rot starting to set in here. This will be a little bit of botrytis, which will be setting in. There's a little black grape down at the bottom there, which has got botrytis. Botrytis isn't a bad thing, actually. It gives us extra sweetness and extra character, but it's still very much time that they came in. So they're too ripe for sparkling wine, for example. If I was trying to make a sparkling wine, I'd be going out and picking them much earlier to try and capture that acidity and be picking them on acids rather than on sugar levels. So, would you like to mark this wine? I'm going to have a bit of cheese off screen as well. Hop, isn't it? So I'm actually trying this with a little bit of Hereford hop. I don't know if it's the right cheese to try with this wine or not, but we'll try it.
Sounds like chewing on the microphone.
Oh, sorry, I'm crunching on the microphone. You've made me very self-conscious now. So, how have we got on there?
Just finished it.
So English wines have really found a place in the market in the last in the last decade, but especially so in the last few years. Awful lot of publicity, especially for sparkling wines, and the industry is growing at a huge rate. There's lots and lots of plantings going in. There's over 500 vineyards in the country, and a lot of them are planting up with varieties for classic sparkling. And they're planting Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and really going for the champagne style of sparkling wine. And that's mostly based in the southeast, where they've got the same chalky soils that they have in Champagne. So there's some champagne houses who are investing in the UK already. Tattinger have planted 70 acres in Kent, and Pomeroy have invested in a winery in Hampshire. So there's definite interest, and the projection is that the English wine industry will be producing 40 million bottles by 2040. So it's going to be a fairly serious wine producer by then. We think we're fairly serious now, but it's at the moment we're probably doing on average about 10 million bottles a year as an industry. 2018 was very big, about 15 million, but it was a little bit smaller in 2019. So, polling all done?
Yeah. Sorry, yes.
Excuse me.
26%, 7, 26%, 8, 17, 9.
Good.
So,
Okay. So, probably time we could try a third one, couldn't we? So if you've got two glasses, then this might be a good time to have one in one glass and one in the other. You can do a comparison, because the next wine is Willow Brook. Willow Brook has actually got Seeger in it, which is quite aromatic. So that's the variety we've just seen being picked, and we'll see it being pressed in a minute as well. So it has, it's a very early ripening. The acids drop quite low, and the sugar levels go up. It's got Traminer as a parent, and it's very, very aromatic and hints of lychee. But in the Willow Brook, it's only a component of the Willow Brook, so that's not quite so prominent as in the single variety Seeger. But it's a different style to the Coleridge Hill. The Coleridge Hill is a little bit fresher, a bit zestier, and it's got a slightly drier finish. The Willow Brook is a little bit softer. So I'll be interested to see how you get on with that one. So let's have a try of that. I'm not going to make the same mistake this time. I am going to pour 2 glasses.
Thank you.
How's the chat bit going? Is there anything happening on chat?
No.
Ah. Is there anybody left watching?
Yes.
Oh, that's all right then.
70 people.
Oh, good. Excellent. So the interesting thing with this wine is that the sugar levels are actually quite similar between the 2 wines. The difference is that the Willow Brook is lower in acid. So the way that we taste the wine, we taste it as though it's much sweeter because you haven't got the acidity to counteract the fruitiness. And that's also from a 2018 vintage. So that's the other thing you can tell with these 2 wines. The difference between the 18 vintage and the 19 vintage, a little bit more weight in the 18 than there is in the 19. So the 18 would probably stand up to a bit of food a little bit better than the 19s. So once we've picked the grapes, we need to decide well, in fact, before we pick the grapes, we decide what wine we're trying to make. And if we're wanting the sparkling wines, then we're picking a little bit earlier. And when we do our pressing, we actually know what we're trying to do with the wine before we even start to do anything with it. So I think the next thing to do is probably show you a little video again, and this will show you the winemaking process, and then we can have a little bit more of a chat about it afterwards. So let me try and, you have to bear with me a minute whilst I try and find it on my computer. I'll disappear off screen and then I will be back to with the video. So bear with, don't go away, but I will.
Did you opt in?
No. Can't find it. It must be that one. It doesn't feel quite right. Do they? On the basis this is the only one I've got. Yeah. I don't know whether this is.
We've got different screens, so it's just got your name on it.
Yes. Where's my Zoom gone in? Right. I've lost. Right, I'm back. I found it. So I share the screen again. There we are. So these are the grapes coming up to our winery. Every bin is weighed. We put them on some scales so that we know exactly how much is coming in off the vineyard, so we can monitor the yields, and we also can estimate how much juice we might get out of it. So those 3 bins there are just under a ton of grapes. Makes it look as though I do absolutely everything here, but I can assure you I don't. There's a job I can do where I'm sat down and I'll be doing it. So I'll get on the forklift. So we're tipping the grapes into the hopper. And the grapes go up the elevator and then drop into a machine that will take the grapes away from the stalks. And the grapes themselves will drop down onto some rollers, which will just split the skin slightly as they go through. And then the rest of the stalks are thrown out of the side of the machine. And the idea is to get these away from the grapes as quickly as possible, because we don't want the sappy, green, astringent character that comes from this part of the plant. We don't waste anything. These, all of this will go to, goes off to a local biofuel company, so it gets used for biofuels, as does the pomace that comes out at the end. And that's the machine that does the taking away of these stalks. And then it gets pumped up through a pipe into the press. Now you can see the grapes there are now split and the juice is freely coming out of them. So we've got some very pink ones there and a few slightly greener ones. And you see the very green ones actually don't get pressed. The press will actually leave those alone, so we won't get those unripe juices coming out. We put the lid on the press. It has been known to forget, but normally we remember. And then these are pneumatic presses. They're very, very gentle with the juice, with the grapes, and squeeze very, very gently up less than the bar pressure, and the juice will flow very freely out into the tray underneath. Tastes really, really good at this stage, and we'll actually be taking that juice in and doing the same analysis on it as we did for the grapes, just to check that what we tested in the vineyard is actually what we're picking. And then the juice gets pumped away into a tank, and it's left to settle for 24 hours, and that's where we'll pick things up in a little while. But you can see after the press, the stalks, the skin's very, very dry. There's a lot of pip in there, a lot of skin, and that's the bit that's taken away for biofuel as well. See how dry it is. So out of a ton of grapes, we'll get about 700 litres of juice, and by the time it's been through the winemaking process, it will be giving us about 850 bottles to a ton. So an acre of vines should give us 2 or 3 tons of grapes, and we'll get about 850 bottles from each ton. So if you've got a spare half acre, then you can think about planting the 501st vineyard in the country. There you go. We're back in the room. So how's the Willow Brook going down? We probably ought to have a little vote on that. Ah, yes, I fooled you. I forgot to say. I fooled you on this one. I thought I'll keep you awake and keep you concentrating, so I'll put them in reverse order. That's the only one I've done that with. What I don't know is how that compares with the last one, but Elaine will work it out and let us know towards the end. So that was a general video which shows what we do with most of our still wines. There are a few variations. For red wines, for example, they will tend to get fermented on the skins. So they'll still get tipped into the hopper, they'll go up into the machine and have the stalks removed, but then rather than going into a press, they'll just go into a tank. And then we'll add some yeast to that tank, and we'll keep punching down the skins to keep them moist, and we'll do the fermentation on the actual skins. And then we'll pull it out from the tank, put it back into the press and squeeze it, but it will be squeezed as wine rather than juice. The other thing that we do if we're wanting to make sparkling wine, in Champagne especially, they use something called whole bunch pressing. So they would miss out the removing of the grape from the stalk, and they'd put the stalks and the grapes into the press absolutely whole, and they wouldn't rotate it. They would just squeeze and then release, squeeze and release again. And they're getting very, very clean juice out from the grape. Because with a sparkling wine, you're trying to get the juice away from the skins and the pips as quickly as you possibly can with as little contact. Because that juice is the best juice for sparkling wines. It will hold on to CO2 better, so it's part of the reason you get very, very small bubbles. And it will also have slightly less jammy, fruity character, which isn't necessarily a good thing for sparkling wine. For still wines, it is a very good thing for sparkling wines. Because when we taste sparkling wines, we tend to use terms like brioche and yeasty and biscuity, and we don't tend to talk about fruits very much. So we're looking for the autolysis with the yeast, whereas with still wines we talk about fruit character all the time. So that first juice is very, very good for sparkling. So if we're making sparkling wine, we do a little bit of whole bunch pressing, but most of the time I will still go through that process and put it into the press, and then I'll just let the juice that just falls out without any squeezing, we'll use for our sparkling wine. And that's why our classic Cuvées got that little bit more fruit character maybe than some of the more classic champagne styles. So there you have the pressing. We're probably then we're heading now towards the winemaking stage, so we're making quite good progress. Yep, we're doing all right for time. We did put an hour and a half on this because I knew that we would struggle to get through in an hour, but I'm sure it won't go on for quite an hour and a half unless you've got loads and loads of questions that you're going to start asking. But I've got quite a few questions from a few people, which I'll go through in a little while. But once the juice goes into the tank, it's just left to settle for 24 hours. And I've actually pulled some juice out, which you can see here, and demonstrates quite well what would happen in a tank. So this is the Madeleine Angevine that we pressed yesterday. It's settled in the tank. You can see it's very, very clear at the top, right the way down until we get to this bottom bit where we've got quite a bit of solid that's settling there. So this clean juice is the nicest juice to be making wine from. This bit at the bottom we will be discarding. So that's why we put it in the tank for 24 hours to let it settle like this. And then we rack it off from about here. So all of this clean wine will go into the tank, and that's when we start our fermentations off. So I've got another little video to show you in a minute. We will be testing our sugars and our acids again, just to make sure that the juice is still as we thought it was. And then after, as I say, after the 24 hours, we'll be putting it into a new tank, and then we're starting the fermentation off. So we're adding some other things. We might add some bentonite to help with the fining, and we'll be adding the yeast to help get the fermentation going. So if I'm starting some yeast up, I thought it might be quite good fun to do some now. So apart from the fact we've got a few problems with some flies, I'd show you how we start our yeast off. Fruit flies they are, yes. So I'm trying to do it in a very clear container so you can see what's going on. So what I've got here is I've got the juice and we've tested it for sugars and acids, and we've decided that it only needs a little bit of help with some bentonite, and I can start the fermentation off. And I will rehydrate yeast in the lab and get the yeast going before I add it back into the main tank. So in order to help get the yeast going, I need to heat the juice up. And the easiest way to heat the juice up is to actually add a little bit of water, a little bit of hot water, and I take it up to 38 degrees, and then I'll be adding the yeast. So you'll bear with me. I'll switch the tap on. I'll grab my thermometer. Wait for the water to go hot. It'll take you a lot longer than it normally does. Whilst that's getting warm, I'll show you the yeast. So I would normally measure the yeast out. So that's going to be the sort of amount that I'd be looking to add. So the yeast there is, you can see that's the dried yeast, very much like a yeast you'd expect from with baking and things. So it looks exactly the same. It's vacuum packed and dried. It comes from Scandinavia. They're wine yeasts, and every winemaker has their own favourite yeast. I've got 2 or 3 that I've been using since I've been here since the 80s, and occasionally I experiment with others, but normally I come back to these ones that I like. And this is a yeast called 71B, and it works really, really well on aromatic varieties. So, that wasn't a bad guess, was it? So now I've got my juice up to about 39 degrees, which is perfect. Anywhere between about 38 and 43. Mustn't go over 43 because that will kill the yeast. And then we just sprinkle it over the top. You're going to see this again in a video in a minute, but I just thought we'd have a look. Now, I don't actually stir it. I'll leave it to just rehydrate itself. If I stir it, then it's a little bit too much of a shock for the yeast. So the idea of this is when a fermentation takes place, the first part of the yeast's work is called aerobic, so it needs oxygen, and it needs during that phase it will just reproduce. So 2 become 4, 4 become 8, and rapid cell division. And then when it runs out of the oxygen, it will then go into an anaerobic phase, which is when it starts to work on the sugars and convert those into alcohol. So all we're trying to do here is get the population of yeast up, and they sometimes call this a yeast bomb. And you actually add a little bit more wine to it, add a little bit more wine until it's acclimatized, and then sorry, juice, not wine, and then we tip it into the tank. So I draw the similarity a little bit. If you jump into very cold water, it takes your breath away a bit, and that's the same for the yeast. So by giving it a nice warm start and gradually reducing the temperature, it doesn't get that shock when it goes into the wine, which will be down at sort of 10, 12 degrees. So we'll leave that to do its stuff, and yeah, Elaine says cheers. but we'll just leave that, and then we'll keep having a look at it periodically. You can actually just see the yeast is starting. Some of it will go down, and it will recirculate and then come back up again, and we'll get quite a lot of activity going on before we actually add it into the wine. So there we are. I'll leave it there. Okay, so we'll try another wine in a minute, but before we do, let me just show you a little video montage showing the process that goes on in the winery with this stage when we're doing the racking. So I'll just bear with me a minute. I will disappear and I'll come back with the video. You weren't expecting me to be that quick, were you? I'm getting good at this.
Back to you then.
Yeah, that's not for long. There we are. So you'll see that the tap is halfway up, well, not halfway up the tank, but off the bottom. So we're able to take the juice from that clean bit and leave the dirtier stuff behind. We start the pump and we put it into a mixing tank. So this is where we can add the bentonite and make any other adjustments we might need to make for, we've got to adjust the acidity a little bit. We're allowed to reduce acid if we've got grapes that have got too much acid, but in this country we're not allowed to add acid. So there's different laws in different parts of the world regarding winemaking. So we put most of the wine into this tank so we can mix it and get the bentonite in, and we'll cut back in a minute, I think, to the tank. But you can see that the juice is quite clean. So just like that sample I showed you, it's the cleanest juice coming off the top of the tank. So then, once we can get the door off, we take the door. The wine's below the door level most of the time when we do that. And there inside you can see that's the wine that's settled. A little bit of debris on the top, but most of it is down at the bottom of the tank. So we can then put the rouser, we call the rouser, it's the end of the pipe that we can put into the tank. So it's still not on the bottom of the tank, but we can actually put a light on and see exactly how much. If you look at just the right-hand side of the hose, you can see a little bit of disturbing of the bottom bit. So we take that down as far as we can, and then we can do the mixing and pour this is the bentonite going in. So bentonite is very good for, there's something called protein stability. So if a wine's got protein in it, then it can have a slight haze. So bentonite helps to avoid that. And it also helps with the settling of the wine. So it just helps to give us more clean wine. So there you are, here's somebody else having a go at doing the yeast. Much better than I did then. The important thing with finings and things, we don't use finings that we don't need to. We'll only treat wines that need it. And we always try and use vegan alternatives now. So the days of, here you are, here's the yeast that's been acclimatized, the bomb's gone as far as it needs to, and then the wine's just being, the juice is just being, the yeast is being tipped into the juice. And there you can see that's the wine in its tank, and it will just be left to go through its fermentation. So there you are. So sorry, yes, I was saying about the bentonite and about finings. In general, we try and use as little fining as we can, and most of the time, the only thing that the wine will see is a little bit of bentonite. We do like to keep the wines as natural as possible, and all of our wines at the moment are suitable for vegetarian and vegan, which is becoming more and more of an issue. So it's something that we try and stick to. Let's see how our yeast is doing. Yeah, Elaine's saying she can smell it, so you do get a very, very good yeasty smell. You can see that there's a little bit of activity. Now it's getting a bit cloudier. There's a lot of movement of yeast in and around here. So that would normally sit for another 20 minutes, half an hour, before that would get added to some more wine, but some more juice, sorry. I keep saying wine, not juice. Elaine keeps correcting me. Right. It's been a while since you had a wine, isn't it? So maybe we should have another wine. The next wine we're going to try is May Hill. So I'm going to, yeah. May Hill. So May Hill is it's quite interesting to try. I wanted to put it into this wine selection. There's a lot of people who, if you were to say to them that it's a slightly sweeter wine, would therefore not be that keen to try it. But what I'm hoping this will demonstrate to you is that a wine with a little bit of sweetness can still be fresh and balanced, and because if you've got the right acidity levels, then it can still be a very pleasant drink. And this, I think, goes really well with cheeses. So it would be interesting if you've got any cheeses around that you're enjoying. This one might go quite well with it. So it's got, the last two wines we've tried have probably got, I don't know, 4 or 5 grams of residual sugar, so quite dry. But in terms of legality, you get up to 9 grams of residual sugar, and it goes from dry to medium dry. And then over 18 grams, it becomes medium or medium sweet. Those two terms are the same, actually. And then over 45 grams is sweet. Now, this wine has got 32, 33 grams. So it's medium to medium sweet, however you would like to call it. So it's 2017. It's been on in the bottle for a little bit longer because it needs a little bit of time for it all to marry. So the acidity and the sugars and the fruit character just take a little bit longer to come together. So I think it's sort of about its right stage now, and it's selling in the shop quite well. So it's using a variety. We used to use a variety called Huxelrebe. We haven't got much Huxel now, but we do use Huxelrebe. It'll have a little bit of Müller-Thurgau and Reichensteiner. And we leave the grapes on the vine to get that extra little bit of sugar, and then we have to stop the fermentation. So all of the other wines we've tried so far, we actually let the fermentation go all the way through, and then we might add back a little bit of something we call sweet reserve. Sweet reserve is basically unfermented grape juice. So we make our own here, and we store it in our cold stores, and we bring it out and we add it in tiny little amounts to help bring a little bit of sweetness back into the wine if we need to. So with this wine, we actually stop the fermentation. And we stop it by regularly monitoring the sugar levels and watching those go down. And when we get to the right specific gravity, we move it into our cold store, and our cold stores go down to -4, and that will stop the fermentation. So the wine will settle with quite a bit of residual sugar in it, and then we can filter it out and filter all of the yeast away. So that's how we make this wine, and it's getting that balance right. So we would leave more acidity in the grapes in order to balance that sweetness. Cheers. Oh, yeah. Yeah, enjoy it first. Or not. I better pour another glass. So, it's getting a good head on it now. So actually I would probably, because there's still a little bit of dry yeast left in the top, I think I will give it just a little bit of help now. Just turn the top bit over to get those last bits of yeast at the top a little bit more hydrated. smells good. Yeah. And you can see, still see the activity of the yeast is quite, it's getting more and more prominent. So once we've, once the fermentations are finished, one of the advantages of winemaking in this country is that the temperatures tend to be quite cold by the time we get to doing our harvesting and our fermentations. So all of the disadvantages that might come from cold weather and adverse weather in the vineyard, they all turn into advantages for winemaking. So we're very lucky here. We've got very, very good facilities. We've got an air-conditioned winery, which is constantly at 12 to 14 degrees. And that's the ideal temperature for these fermentations. We've got temperature control on every tank that we do our fermentations in, so we can control the temperatures. And what we're trying to do is keep the fermentations cold so that we preserve that fruit character in the wine. We don't want it all boiling away. So the character in the wine is quite delicate, and it's very important that we keep that for our in the bottle. So it'll take 3 or 4 weeks for the fermentation to go through, and then it will be left to settle. We will be then racking it into the cold store, and that making the temperature go down really helps with the settling as well. So we try and avoid doing any filtration until after it's been through there. And then we'll do our blending, and we decide whether it's going to be staying as a single variety or going to sparkling wines or still wines. We'll be doing our blending, and then we'll be filtering and starting our bottling program for the year, starting probably February, March time, and then running right the way through to this time of year when hopefully all the tanks will be empty again, ready for the next harvest to come in. We've hit a slight snag this year because we've had 2 or 3 months with slightly reduced activity, so we're playing a little bit of catch up with the bottling. So in a way, having a slightly smaller crop is not the worst thing for us, because it does take the pressure off the tanks a little bit. So we've still got some of the last year's wines in tank. We're busy bottling those at the moment. So that's our May Hill, medium to medium sweet. I've not tasted any cheese with it yet, but I will do probably after the session, because I think that the noise that my microphone picks up is probably a bit off-putting. Right, so time for a poll, I think. Tell me what you think of May Hill.
Split the crowd.
On the photocopy, there's a printout with somebody that emailed some questions. I thought we might split the crowd a little bit on this one, but it's one of those wines where I think as we drink wine and taste wine, we start off with a slightly sweeter palate and drinking sweeter white wines, and then as we drink more wine, our palate becomes drier and we move on to drier wines, and then we get brave enough to try red wines as well, and so our palate becomes far more attuned to drier styles, and probably people leave the sweeter wines behind. And on the other hand, there's those that love a little bit of residual sugar in their wines, and as I say, I think this goes quite well with cheese. But we've split the crowd a little bit. We've got 7s and 8s, but we've also got a 1 and a 5. So yeah, that's all right. We'll see what the average comes back at, and Elaine can tell us. You shared the results?
Yeah.
Very good. Right. So where do we go from here? Red wines. How are we doing for time? Oh, okay. So most red grapes have got a white juice. Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, all got very, very pale juices. But for us, well, for anybody, for any winemaker, if you've got to get colour into your wine, you need to ferment it on the skins, which is what I was explaining a little bit earlier. But you also have to heat the temperature up quite high in order to extract the colour. And when you heat the temperature up, you extract the colour, but you also extract all of the tannins and some of the bitter characters as well. So that's how you make red wine out of these classic varieties. But there's two varieties that we use in our Ravens Hill, which we'll try in a minute, which have a red juice. They're varieties called Regent and Rondo, and they've been developed in Germany. Germany are net importers of wine, and they're looking to push the boundaries of grape growing all of the time. So these two varieties have been produced to help red wine production in cool climates. So I'm able to ferment it on the skins without raising the temperature hugely. So I'm getting some of the character, a little bit of the tannins, but not overly, not having to extract too much. And that's really the style that we've developed for our Ravens Hill, which is the next wine we're going to try. And probably might as well pour a glass now. Oh, my yeast's going a little bit mad. I think it's nearly time it went in the tank. So, Ravens Hill, last wine tonight. I should say, for those of you that have opened wines and you're not finishing the glass, not finishing the bottle, I appreciate that 5 bottles of wine, if you're sat on your own, is quite a lot to open on one night. But the beauty of the screw cap is that they'll go back on. And if you keep them in the fridge, or keep them certainly cool, then they should last for several days and be perfectly fine. So don't feel that you need to keep going all night. You can have a rest and have another go tomorrow and Monday. So this is Ravens Hill, cool climate red, not too much extraction from the skin, so it's got a little bit of tannin, but not too much. It's English reds tend to have the sort of fruit character that of the fruit that we grow in this country. So things like cherries, damsons, raspberries, that sort of slight bitter fruit character. And it's I think you could probably have this slightly chilled even, and maybe with should go very well with some, I think some soft cream cheese goes really well with, but I think any cheese with a red wine's good, isn't it? Did you say charcuterie?
I said sharp goat's cheese.
Oh, sharp goat's cheese. There we are. So this particular wine is 2018. A very, very hot summer. I think on average 1 degree higher during the growing season. So very, very ripe fruit that came in. A little bit of skin fermentation, and then press them as we saw the press is working, and then straight into a tank. We don't settle it again, it goes straight into a tank, and we don't even have to add any more yeast because it's already got the yeast in it. So it just goes into a stainless steel tank. Temperatures are reduced a little bit, so the last bit of the fermentation happens at a cool temperature to try and help keep that fruit character in it. So probably, well, I'll give you a few minutes to have a bit of cheese with it, and then we'll do the poll. In the meantime, I had an email before the session from Mrs. Arkle, So thank you for all those. So she was asking, let's go through, she's asked lots of questions. She's making me work very hard. Has the summer been good? Well, I think I've answered that. Yes, it's been a really, really good year. Right, as long as there are a few English vineyards that got frosted in May. We had some very cold nights in the second and third week of May, which caught a few vineyards. We're very lucky. We've got a really good site here. We're situated midway between the Welsh Mountains to the west, the Cotswolds to the east, and the Malvern Hills to the north. We've got this sort of horseshoe effect, and that gives us a really good maritime climate with below average rainfall and above average sunlight. And we're normally one of the last people to get frosted, and that was probably the case this year. We got through it. We got a little bit of frost damage right down in the bottom of the vineyard, but not enough to worry us too much. Ideally, we would one question that is asked is how many grapes do we have per vine? It's a difficult one to answer. We try and have two bunches of grapes per shoot. So we're on quite a low planting density. So we only have about 800 vines to the acre, and we have so each bud, each shoot is about 6 inches apart, and we'll try and get 2 bunches of grapes from each one of those. They'd like to produce 3, so we try and limit it to 2 because we get a little bit of better ripeness that way. Do we buy grapes in? Generally, no. We do have a few other vineyards locally that we actually manage. So we've got our own 75 acres of estate grown. We've also got a couple of vineyards that where farmers have planted, and they want us to sort of manage it and take the fruit. So that's how we tend to get any extra grapes that we would require. Is it possible to buy large bladders of wine, as in France, direct from the winery? The short answer is no, not at the moment, although there's an awful lot of work going on with other sort of formats, and one of those is bag-in-box. And I think that in the future we might see more and more wines coming as in the format of bag-in-box. And when you start going into bag-in-box, you can go as big as 20 litres. So it's not impossible to see that happening. But certainly there's some very, very good wines now being seen in bag-in-box. So I think that's a format that might come in the future for us. And what's the best temperature for storing wine? Well, the first thing I'd say is probably the most important thing is that the temperature is constant. So if you get a lot of variation in temperature, that's very bad. In the old days, people used to have cellars below ground, very, very constant temperature, 8 to 10 degrees. I think we've spoken in previous tastings about us drinking wine too cold in this country. We tend to put it in the fridge. The fridge takes wine down to 4 degrees, and then we pull it out and drink it, and that cold temperature will kill off an awful lot of the character. So I think drinking wine at sort of 8 to 10 degrees is probably good, but then if you're storing it, probably storing it at that sort of 10 to 12 degrees is absolutely fine. And which are the best grapes for sparkling wine? So with our if you're looking at the classic varieties, you're looking at Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. We've planted some Chardonnay recently here. We're waiting for the first crop to come in the next year or two. We've got Pinot Noir, and we've actually got a wine in the shop, Blanc de Noir, which is had 5 years on its lees. So those are the classic varieties that sort of they're growing in the Champagne region and a lot in the southeast of England now. We find Seyval Blanc works really, really well, and we find that a little bit of help from some other varieties like Pinot Noir and Reichensteiner help to give it a bit more complexity. So that was a few questions that came from Mrs. Arkle. Time to let me know what you think of the Ravens Hill, I think. There's my yeast. It's going a little bit wrong. I'm going to have to move it to the sink now. So just have the poll of the Ravens Hill, and then really I think we've covered quite a lot. I don't know how many people we've got left.
67.
Oh.
3 people left.
All right. Well, one person actually very politely emailed me and asked me if it would be all right if they left early, which I thought was lovely because they had to go out. It's been a enjoyable session. I've enjoyed sort of sharing all of this with you. If you worked out how to use the chat, and there's quite a lot of chatting going on, but look, it's 30 odd chats there.
Oh,
Have you found those?
I haven't got them. No, I've got my tabs open, but I haven't got them. Sorry.
Oh, you know why?
Why? 'Cause you haven't.
No, because the chats, so they've set it up so the chats come through to me, not you.
Ah.
I think. So I'm sorry, I've been saying, oh, nobody's chatting, and you are. I've got loads and loads of people who've chatted. So let me see if I can rectify this now whilst you're voting.
Oh, finished.
Right, I don't know. I've now got such a long list. Oh, okay, here's one question I've got. Okay, so I'm working through a few. Forgive me if I miss them. I'm trying to get through them. So Arabella's asking me, why is the May Hill in a clear bottle and whilst the others are in green? That's a good question. I think it's purely a marketing thing. And I think as the wine gets older, it gets a little bit more colour. But from a winemaking point of view, the best colour to have the darker the bottle, the better, because the less ultraviolet light you get going through and affecting the bottle. So there is actually a bit of a movement towards using green glass and using less clear glass. It's argued that there is something called light strike, which can affect wines in a clear bottle. But I think in our climate, it's not nearly so much of a problem. So it's very much for appearance. I think we could go to a green bottle in the future, but sometimes it's difficult to break away from what people are used to seeing. Right, what else have I got? Do we ever pick grapes? This is from Rosemary Davies. Do you ever pick grapes with a frost on, similar to German? But I did say when we were talking about the Siegerode grapes that I'd left some on the vine, and the aim of that is to actually get botrytis into the grapes. So you might have heard of a thing called noble harvest. So if you get these grapes that have got a little bit of botrytis to them, botrytis is exactly the same as the fruits you see on the in your fruit bowl. When you keep it there for too long, you get this sort of furry mold over the top. And what it's doing is it's piercing the skin and extracting all of the moisture, all of the water. So it leaves you with a really, really intense raisiny juice. So that gives you a very, very sweet wine, but quite low volume. Now, Icewine, which is produced in Canada and in Germany, is where they leave the grapes on the vine and the frosts come and they freeze the grapes. And then they pick the grapes straight away and bring them up to the press. And they press them whilst they're still frozen so that all of the water is frozen and all of the intense sugary juice will come out. We don't quite have that climate over here. It's very difficult. We can't wait long enough to get these very, very cold nights. Our climate is actually too mild in the autumn. So that's not something that we're really able to do. What we can do is pick the grapes and then put them into a cold store and actually freeze them artificially, if you like, and then pull them out and press them. But if we do that, winemaking law demands that you don't do anything else to the wine. It has to be done and treated exactly like that. So it's not something that we really have done very much. I prefer to try and get noble rot, the noble harvest, which we can probably do 2 years in 10, I would say. The rest of the time, we just produce what's called a late harvest, which is mostly Cigareva, very, very aromatic, about 60, 70 grams of residual sugar. So, what else have we got? We've got so many questions here. We're going to be here till 9 o'clock. Where do you stand on letting red wines breathe? Well, I think all wines can benefit from a bit of breathing, even when they've been, and in fact more so now when in a screw cap even, because there's more and more wines that the wine experts describe as being slightly reductive, which means that they're lacking in oxygen. And actually, if you decant a wine and actually let the oxygen get to it, you can actually get an awful lot more out of your wine. So I'm very happy to see any of our wines decanted, I think, but probably the red more so. Getting a little bit of air into it can really, especially if a wine's been in bottle for a long, long time, just letting it come out into the open and breathe a bit before you drink it is a very good idea. We've been joining you from 2 locations, South Wales and Yorkshire. So there you go. We're covering the countryside. That's Zoe and Neil. I'm sorry, I don't think I'm seeing all of the questions, but Zoom seems to be randomly letting me see some occasionally. Yeah, just a couple more. I do apologise if we haven't covered things that you want. You can always email me. I'm very happy if you email in. The emails get passed to me, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you don't feel that you've got the answer to. Martin, why do you think people still want to have bottles with wine with corks in them? Is there a real reason, or is it simply snobbery? Certainly for us, our wines are, we make them, we put them into bottle, and they're ready for drinking. So there is no point in having a cork. The cork doesn't serve any purpose for us. Our Pinot Noir will benefit from a bit of bottle aging, so we use a cork for that. So I'd say generally people that are doing a little bit more oaking with their wines, corks can be quite useful. If bottle aging is part of the winemaking process, then they're essential. But I think that a lot of people like the sound of the popping of the cork. And I remember somebody saying many years ago that if you could invent a screw cap that went pop, then all of our problems would be solved. We do. I'm conscious we're getting on for time, but there's a few minutes left, so I'll keep going. I won't be offended if anybody feels it's time for dinner and needs to go, but so I'll say now, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope that it's been an enjoyable experience for you. Now, I've just had one here. This was sent at 8:05 saying, amazing wine with Thai food. That's from Louise Clark. I'd say that's especially true with probably with the Willow Brook, with Cigareva as a variety, with a little bit of lychee and grapefruit character. Yeah, it does go very well with slightly spicy foods. Yes, I'm gonna have to go and cook some curry now. Don't forget to give Elaine a glass. Thank you, Gavin. Thank you, Gavin and Vanessa. So there's a few that are being very complimentary. I'm not going to embarrass myself by reading those out, but thank you very much for those comments. For the next virtual tasting, would you be able to deliver to France? Oh, yeah, that's an interesting one. It is quite difficult to get wine out of the country without paying a fortune in duty and taxes and haulage. But I'm sure, given enough notice, we can look at it for you. Did you have problems getting pickers this year? Are they Europeans? Well, yeah, that's something I should have said actually. We're picking with a smaller gang this year. I think, did I mention that? Yeah. And that's partly because there aren't a number of pickers available. And that's because there aren't as many Eastern Europeans that have come over. We've had a difficult few years. 3 years ago, somebody said Brexit, and a lot of them disappeared back home. And then obviously with COVID, a lot of them haven't returned. So yeah, finding good pickers has been a challenge. So we're picking with a smaller group and picking for longer hours.
Mostly British.
Hmm?
Mostly live here.
Yeah, so they're all local people, and they've been picking here for years, and they are at least our best pickers. They pick, on average, at the moment, they're picking, at the beginning of the season, they'll pick about a third of a ton each. By the time we get to the end of the season, they'll be picking probably 2/3 of a ton each. And that's not because they get better, it's because the grapes generally later on have a little bit more weight to them, and the varieties that we pick later on, like Phoenix, Orion, and Sauvignon Blanc, have slightly bigger bunches, and so you fill the bins a little bit quicker. They're pretty practiced by then as well. They got really good suntans this year as well so far. So I'm very happy to keep going and answering a few questions. You know, please do give us some feedback on how you think it's done. There's a lot of feedback here, which is great. And if you'd like us to do another one, and you've got an idea on what the theme might be, then certainly let us know. The plan is possibly to do one, do one near Christmas, maybe, if people are interested. We'll certainly be putting out a case offer in November, and I think there'll be a few new wines coming out. So we've run out of our 2014 pink sparkling, but we have a 2017, which we're just finishing off in the winery now. So I think that will probably be ready. And it's also possibly, sticking my neck out here, but I might even have a red sparkling that you might like to try. But we'll see how that goes. I'm just working on it at the moment. I made it in 2016. It's been sat on its leaves, and actually it's been quite interesting now. So we might have that would be quite an interesting one for Christmas. New, oh gosh, I'm glad you said that. Yes, first release. So this is something that I should have said right at the beginning. The fermentations that we're starting off now, the video footage that you've seen of the grapes being picked and of the wines being started off, these fermentations will form part of our first wine that we release in late November, early December. It's called First Release. It's a sort of tongue-in-cheek, started off as a tongue-in-cheek thing to rival Beaujolais Nouveau, but it's now become quite a serious part of what we do. And so we'll have some of that wine available in late November, early December. And that's really, obviously, very young, very fresh, very fruity character, and might go well with a turkey, you never know. So yes, all of that to look forward to. I've got to get through the rest of harvest first, but it's all going okay so far. And I think we've got through a session without losing connectivity, and most of the videos I hope have worked for you. They've worked this end, but obviously we're reliant on the internet. One thing I also should have said, last thing I'll say, and then I'll promise I'll shut up. Sustainability. We talked in the past a little bit in tastings about organic wines and biodynamic wines. And since our last tasting, we've just passed our sustainability audit, which is a new initiative being run by our trade association, which is WineGB. So I think wine sustainability I think sustainability all round is becoming a very, very important thing. And so we're very pleased to have passed our audit. We've got a lot of work to do still to get better. The target is to try and be carbon neutral in the vineyard and the winery by 2030, which is going to be a challenge, but we're up for it, and we'll see what we can do. Yeah, so we're one of the first vineyards to actually get this accreditation, and I think that it's given our staff and our customers something to focus on. I think it's a very interesting area, and there's an awful lot we can do to help the environment as well as help financially and socially as well. So that's something we can talk about a little bit more in the future. So on that note, I did say an hour and a half, and we're bang on. So I thank you all very much for indulging us with a full hour and a half session. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I hope that lockdown isn't imminent in too serious a form, But please all stay safe and keep in touch with us. And we'll see you again soon, I hope. Come and see us if you haven't, and come and see us again if you have. Thank you. Bye.